This first series that I'm going to show, it's called Boxes. It's called the Slave Series. There are only a few paintings in this particular series. This was done, this first one around when I was in graduate school, then a few right after graduate school. This was at a time post 9/11 when I had just moved back to Michigan, and I wasn't really painting a lot. I was actually working in a psychiatric hospital for like a long time, and I would only get maybe 1 to 2 paintings done per year. But throughout that particular period in my life, I felt that rather than just commit to being an artist, I had somehow created this prison of my own design that I had placed myself in by getting attached to a corporate job and being really into like money and worrying about taking care of myself instead of taking care of myself spiritually and the things that spiritually in terms of being an artist and fulfilling what I know my practice was. I'm sure most of us are familiar with this diagram of a slave ship, and we've seen this numerous times, which describes the way that bodies were moved throughout the transatlantic slave trade. And I use this as a sort of like jumping off point to start to create works like this one. So this is called Boxes. This is actually my graduate school thesis project. And this is, I believe, 5 by 6 feet. At that point in time, it was the largest painting I had done. But being in graduate school, being broke, frustrated, and thinking about these things of like this type of prison that I had created myself in, because thinking very pragmatic about it, some of the issues that a lot of the issues that I had, they were my fault. And so I decided to take the blame, and I thought about this. And so using the slave ship motif sort of as a metaphor for that's why you have these 4 bodies sort of like stuffed into a box, and it's ambiguous as to how they got there, where's the light source coming from. And as you'll see from my later work, I don't use nudity anymore, really, but if I do, and if you ever see nudity in my work, and this is just something you'll know like going forward, usually it symbolizes a psychological space as opposed to an actual place that we're in. Because I think about like in our minds, that's the one place where you are naked and vulnerable. And so if you ever see that in my work, that's what that'll be a metaphor for, not a bunch of nude people stuffed in a box necessarily. And so this is one. These were 2 in that series as well. And this one was systemic. This was the last. Like I said, I think there were only like 4 or 5 paintings from that series at that time, and these were like literally like the early 2000s, like when I painted all of these. Moving on to Blackface. At the point in time, say around 2011, I was laid off from my cushy corporate job. And as frustrating as that was, and as cliche as it is to say, that was the best and worst thing that could have ever happened to me. Because the only thing I had to do was look for a job and paint, like during that particular period. And I, even though I was born and raised in Detroit, I had never shown in Detroit ever. Like I literally had shown in New York, I'd shown in Ipsy when I went to school at Eastern. And things, and actually even in other states, but never in Detroit. And so around 2011, there's a place in Detroit called Cass Cafe where one of the curators, Dave, he agreed to put me in a 2-man show with an abstract artist named Sophil Gardner, a really popular, famous guy from Detroit. And this was really an opportunity for me to my coming out moment, like for Detroit, because nobody had any idea who I was. I'd been working in corporate America for all these years. I wasn't making work. I wasn't on the art scene. But this was a particular point in time where we started to see all these mass shootings of young black men in the media. And then as you would start to see the narrative of the media and how they describe black people, it was always in this very ugly or dangerous way. And so I wanted to create this series of paintings, large-scale portraits of people of color, really beautiful portraits, which were sort of as an inoculation against the images that the media were portraying of us. And so you ended up with some things like this. So this was a portrait of my little brother. This is called The Child Day and Night. The one with the eyes open, I actually finished this one around 2007. And then I left the other one literally in a finished state for all of those years. And then when I had the opportunity to do the show, I decided to finish that one and put them together as a diptych. But this was my little brother, especially him coming of age. I think he was 9 on this picture. He's an adult now, which is really interesting for him to like look at these types of images and for me to look at this and know how innocent he was then and to know where he is now. It's very, very interesting to kind of see that coming of age. And then just as a metaphor, I think it's interesting that the first one done from life when he was actually there at that time, and then the second one primarily I had to do it from memory and just what I knew of my brother. And so there's much more of an interpretation with the one with the eyes closed than the one with the eyes open. But it just shows two stages of a complex individual, and he is that. And I'm happy that I at least was able to capture that even in his youth. The self-portrait. This and all these are pretty large scale. So this is 5 by 4 feet. It's a self-portrait, but this is called I call it the Gwen and Rodney project, like after my parents. Because if you know Gwen and Rodney, there is nothing about my parents that will lead you to believe they ever would have got together to have me. They're so polar opposite. Like, for them to even get in the room, it's like comedy to watch them go at it. And I'm just like, how did that even happen? You know? And so this was a portrait painted during that period, like right after the layoff. And you can see I don't seem like the happiest camper in the world. And I wasn't at that time, you know? And so it is sort of like a realistic depiction of where I was, you know, emotionally and physically at that particular point in life. And, you know, I named it after my parents, where it is an experiment to see two unlikely people to create an unlikely person, and what is my life like at this stage, you know? And so that's just sort of what I was thinking about during this. This is called A Lady in Red, Not Jean Hill. 5 by 4 feet as well. This is Whitney Syphax Walker. She's a writer and poet host in Detroit. And it's called A Lady in Red, Jean Hill. She's wearing red, but also Jean Hill was the lady in red. Like during the Kennedy assassinations, when you would look at the footage, there was a woman on the lawn wearing red. And she kind of became this really iconic figure. It's like the woman in red, and it's like Jean Hill was really famous. And so I was just kind of paying, you know, kind of being snarky, like paying homage towards that while, you know, painting a sister, you know, who I think is really beautiful. This is Portrait of Erica Foreman. This is called The 24th Bride. This was painted for a show influenced by the work of the musician Fela Kuti. And then I'd heard apparently he had some concert/ritual where he married like 23 women all in one fell swoop. And I just thought that was really, really insane. But my friend Erica, who is was it Cornell? She's like a Cornell scholar, like Ivy League scholar, like writer, like one of the most intelligent women I know. I thought it'd be interesting to paint her in that context. So like she would be the 24th bride. Like she would be the one person who's not having this. Like these other 23 women got to go. If you're gonna come here, you know, like if this is her house. And so I was just thinking about that, you know, like in terms of the iconography of what this portrait was about. This is called Day Queen. This is my grandmother, Flora Harris. I painted her a few different times, but this is my favorite portrait of her. This is 5 by 4 feet as well. Because these are so large, I do work from photo references. And so when I took this particular one, you know, I asked her we took a lot of shots, but I asked her to close her eyes. And this was I think out of the hundreds of photos I took, this is the one I chose to interpret into a painting. Because I think it shows a sort of self-reflection, a sort of like introspection, and there's something about that I really, really loved in the way that she kind of has the way it's painting in a way where it almost seems like the light is coming from her rather than light coming, you know, like being cast on her. And if you know my grandmother, she's just a really beautiful woman inside and out. Even today when I was trying to help her work her iPad, and it was very, very, very frustrating. Yeah, I love grandma, but man, iPads. This is probably like one of the smallest paintings I've done. I think just like 9 by 12 inches. It's a pretty small one. And this is just called The Wonder Boy. This is my nephew. This was originally painted as a collaboration with a street apparel company who they have this logo of a cartoon boy with a pipe in his hand with a old school bomber helmet, and the guy who owns the company, he wanted to do a collaboration and see what would it look like if I interpreted his character, you know, realistically. And so I had my nephew pose for it with the old school helmet. The pipe is made up. I would not give my nephew a pipe to put in his mouth, just so that you know. But that collaboration didn't work out. But I did think it was a really, really sort of like interesting painting to see like this little kid, and similar to the one with my little brother, how the children of my family, they understand that I'm an artist, and so when it's time to model, literally the personas that they go into, like they lose all of the childlike sort of behavior and they become really, really serious. And I think it's interesting for like a 6-year-old to be there that hardcore and stern. And like when you saw him modeling for it, he literally was like that disciplined because he understands Uncle Ty as an artist and what he's supposed to be doing in that moment. And it's just something that's interesting about that to me.